comes. So I'll be looking around. You already know. This is great off of. What's up? This is Coach Renz. Now, for those on my YouTube channel, they know we haven't done one of these videos in 7 months. Life has just been that way. But we're going to go and discuss Genesis chapter 31. And what's wrong with it? So people have always told me, oh, you should read your Bible. You need to go read your Bible. So I decided that we were going to do just that. Is read it and talk about it. Now, the thing about this, I know I haven't been live in a long time on YouTube, and this is going to be the first time for people on my TikTok as well as Facebook group. Your comments are welcome. We're not going to do a lot of arguing on this. But since I was told I need to read it, we're going to read it. We're going to discuss some things about it that just don't make any sense, and then we're going to talk about some parts of it that do make sense. Some of it will make sense, and some of the things that are missing from the understanding of it. So I was giving a few minutes for people to get on here, but we're going to get started here in a minute because I got things to do around 5 o'clock. So hopefully we won't get too many interruptions because I did not put my phone on airplane mode. But, Cedric, no, my name is Larenzo. So if I talk to certain people from certain ones, it's because people making statements from different platforms, either Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok. I would love for everybody to be on YouTube. That's my favorite platform. But I'm gonna meet you where you at. So we're going to go ahead and get started. But first, before we get started, for those who have watched it on YouTube, and if you ever want to go back and see some of the older versions, just go to my YouTube channel, which is either look it up as my name, LaRenzoreid, or you can look it up as Why I Left Religion with Coach Renz, and you can see the previous versions from Genesis 1 all the way up to, thank you, I appreciate it. I like to dress this way. All the way up to right now Genesis 31. So just to recap a little bit as far as Genesis 30. Genesis 30 we were talking about Jacob and his time frame with Laban. In Genesis 30 we talked about the baby making competition between Rachel and I forgot the other one's name. But between the two sisters of two daughters of Laban. We talked about how Laban continued to trick. Said the audio is not great, very quiet. Let me see if that'll help. Let me know if that helps on the audio on YouTube. But we talked about how they were having a baby making competition, and then Jacob does this, is starting to have this falling out. It might be because YouTube is sitting on my, let me do something with YouTube. I'm gonna do a little slide here. YouTube, let me know if that was better because it was sitting on my laptop, which could cause it to be hearing the sound from the yeah, it was picking up the fan from the laptop. So I just moved that camera. But let's go. That's what Mr. Austin said. But how they was having this baby contest. Now Jacob, was getting fed up with Laban and all the trickery that Laban was doing. And Jacob performs this science experiment and claiming that, and where they're going to split up the herd. And they're going to split it between the speckled and the striped cattle from the solid cattle. And Jacob puts it where they're mating in front of this striped wood, and that creates offspring that are striped and whatnot. So, did you make your bracelets and necklace? No, I actually buy these from other people, just different variations of people and stores. So, he does this science experiment, completely messed up genetics. But go back to chapter 30, and you'll be able to see that one. So we're going to go ahead and continue, because these videos can get long because I explain a lot and talk a lot about it. So where we are now is Genesis chapter 31. And I'm going to read it and then interject at different points of it. If you have any questions or comments concerning it, let me know, and I'll see about answering your questions. So chapter 31 starts out with Jacob is going to flee from Laban at this point. So Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all his wealth from what belongs to our father. And remember, this is coming off the heels of Jacob doing this science experiment, where he put the sheep in front of the stripe, and then they took the cattle because they had a little falling out. So, and Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude towards him was not what it had been, which he was nice to him as long as he was working for him, and he had changed Jacob's wages a bunch of times. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. Some people find this interesting because he's saying that, okay, only if you go back to the land of your fathers will I be with you. If you decide to stay here with Laban, then I won't be with you, which is kind of conditional and some conditional love on this God's perspective. But now he wants to go back to his relatives. And we're going to talk about those relatives a little bit later as well. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. And he said to them, I see that your father's attitude towards me was not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have worked with your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. Now I want you to think about it. How dumb is Jacob that Laban was allowed to change his wages? Remember, he worked for him for 7 years to get Rachel, but then they tricked him and he got the daughter with the lazy eye, right? And then he had to work another 7 years in order to get the actual wife that he wanted, the one that he fell in love with the moment that he saw her carrying some water on her head, right? Well, carrying water, and she gave him some water because he was thirsty. He had been trapped. But he had changed his wages 10 times. How dumb do you have to be to allow somebody to trick you 10 times before you start to get it, before you start to realize that this man is full of shit, right? So, but he said that God is with him. If God is with you, then why would he be allowed to change his wages on him 10 times, to be allowed to trick him in that way? But he said he wouldn't be able to harm him. He said, if he said that the speckled ones will be, your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. If he said that the street ones will be yours, then all of the flocks bore street young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. Now, this is where Jacob begins to, he's initiating a lie, but now he's about to make the lie real good. He said, in breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked and speckled or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. I answered, here I am, which is a weird kind of speech pattern. Like nobody tells a story this way. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flocks are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has done to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. So Jacob right now is lying to his wives. He's telling his wives that he had a dream that he saw all the goats mating that were speckled and spotted. and then thereby producing more speckled and spotted sheep, because Laban had said that any of the ones that were speckled and spotted. But Laban didn't actually say that. Jacob actually said to Laban, when they got ready to split the herds up, he is the one who said, hey, I'll take all the speckled and spotted and striped sheep. And then Laban goes behind his back and he does this weird experiment where he puts speckled and striped wood in front of the goats, in front of the herds. And as they mated, the children then bore out of that were speckled and spotted. Now, to a certain degree, you can say that now the speckled and spotted ones were the ones mating, and that's what the angel was telling him. But he neglected to tell his wives that he was the one who invoked this science experiment, right? So Jacob's native land, which would have been, because he comes from Isaac, would have been Canaan. Because remember, when Isaac was getting older, he said that he didn't want Jacob, and well, his mother said, Rebecca said that they wanted him to have a wife from their own tribe, right? Instead of having a Canaanite wife. But if he couldn't find a wife from his own tribe, then he can have a Canaanite wife. And it's weird because they didn't want him to have a Canaanite wife because the Canaanite women worship different gods. But yet we're going to see later on how even the wives that he picked up from Laban worship different gods. And we'll talk a lot about that when we get down to where they make this pact. But Jacob is straight lying to his wives about how his wealth was created. I mean, how would you feel if you was married to somebody and they tricked your father by doing this bullshit science experiment that cannot work, genetically does not work? And some people say, oh, it's supernatural, it's God. There is no such thing as supernatural. It is supernatural, it's the natural that you can't explain. The natural that goes against what you have already accepted as how the natural world works. But there are things in science that we do not understand yet. We do not know. And these people did not know at that time frame as well. There have been shepherds who have practiced and tried this experiment, and to no avail. It never works, because that's not how genetics work. If that was the case, my children would have been born looking like different colors depending upon the wall that I was looking at when we were mating, when me and their mom was having sex to produce them. No, it doesn't work that way. But Jacob now claims that this came to him in a dream, that he had nothing to do with it. So he's lying to his wives, and he's doing so to gain favor with them so that they will run away with him, right? He said, then Rachel and Leah is the one with the lazy eye.
And get it. Amen. I'm gonna have to relight this a couple times.
All right. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Well, what's interesting is that women back then really didn't have a share in their father's estates anyway. So once they're married off, their share only comes in their husband's estate, and not their father's estate. So this line of dialogue doesn't make sense, because why would they even question that when they know that's not the culture that they lived in, right? Really, this is just them placating to their husband, right? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. So they're basically spreading negative things about their father in order to placate their husband here. Surely with all the wealth that God took away from our fathers belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. Now it's interesting they say do whatever God has told you. I think this is the writers in putting that part in there, because at this time frame, and we're going to see that Rachel and Leah they don't necessarily believe in the God that Jacob is professing, right? Because of what Rachel is going to do in a few minutes here. So they're now getting into, you know how people, because this is the person I care about, I'm going to then side with them because this is my husband or this is my wife. Like oftentimes when your spouse comes and they're telling you of something that happened to them at work, there's a natural tendency to side with your spouse. You know, whether the spouse is right or wrong, right? They side with their spouse. They have no idea, about this dream. They don't know that Jacob tricked their father. So they're going to be going off with their husband, and they know their daddy don't have any money. So of course they're siding with their husband because marriage for them is about stability. I guess the actual question should be, what is the lesson of this story? As we go through it, we're going to see that the lessons that most Christians will take from this story, or Jews and Christians will take from this story, is about being obedient to God. When God tells you to move, you move. That God will, when you've been suffering under somebody's hand like Laban, that if you keep God with you, that God is going to be there for you. But in this situation, God is saying that, yeah, I'm there for you, and I know you cheated this man out of his sheep by doing your little crazy science experiment. But people will pull whatever they possibly can out of it, whether it's good or bad, but mainly to fit them. Just like Rachel and Leah are giving this whole little speech because they want it to fit their husband and not fit whatever the truth of the matter is. But for the most part, there really aren't any good lessons to take from this story, right? The story is just there to add a narrative to how you can you go from Abraham and his lineage and the things that happened, and then the different places and lands that they made claims to God, and how God will always give his people wealth. This is one of those things where I always tell people, when I see people who are poor and downtrodden, but they're not doing a lot, but they believe in this book. If you notice, all the fathers of this book, all the main characters of this book are never poor. They always somehow accumulate wealth, no matter what. So when people sit back and they expect manna from heaven, if they actually understood these stories, there is no manna from heaven that you don't have to work for. You always have to work for it, right? So, where were we? Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all of his livestock ahead of him, along with the goods that he had accumulated in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. So he packing up the family. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean, by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all that he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed to the hill country of Gilead. Now, earlier Rachel said that follow God, as if she believes in that God. But if that was the case, she would have no reason to go into her father's tent and steal. So right now we're saying that she's a thief. And just to give you a little bit right now, the question would have to be, who are the gods of Laban that she stole? This is where, and we're going to see that these gods actually have prominence in the Bible. And many people will talk about how the Bible is polytheistic, how the Bible respects and honors other gods. And this is one of those stories that demonstrates how the Bible honors and respects other gods, because Rachel goes in and she steals his gods. So who are the gods of Laban? Seeing as how Laban is from the city of Ur, Laban most likely, those gods in his trinity would have been the god Sin, the Sumerian and Akkadian god Sin, because in Europe, and not Sin like, oh, I did something wrong, Sin. No, Sin in the Akkadian, who's also known as Nana in the Sumerians, is represented by a crescent moon or the horns of a bull. He is a god, he's a moon god. He's also a god of sheep herders and a god of fertility of the land. So that would have been one of the gods, because it said took his gods. And these are figurines, these are idols that she would have taken. Then the other god in there would have been, so Sin is the father, the moon god, who is also the father of Shemesh, who is the sun god. And then it also would have been, more than likely, it would have been Elnana or Ishtar, who was the fertility goddess, who then, she is the goddess of fertility, of making babies, but also of producing more and more cattle, fertility of the land. So that's the trinity that she would have stolen from Laban's tent, right? So she goes in and steals it. And if he was so confident in his God, why does he have to sneak away? Why does he have to run away? But he does. Because in all these stories, man is more powerful than God. Right? So he leaves and head for the hill country of Gilead. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So it took 3 days for them to tell Jacob. So I guess Jacob went somewhere to shear his sheep and so he can sell the wool. And he had taken his relatives with him. He pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. So he's moving faster, of course. Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Which, this is not Jacob's God. This is not Laban's God. This is Jacob's God. Laban doesn't worship this God. So why would he respect what this God has said? And later we're going to see that he doesn't. He doesn't really respect what this God has said because he's going to go completely opposite of what he was told in his dream. But if you don't worship him, then why would you even bother? Right? So then it goes and said, Jacob pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead, where when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, very caught up, what have you done? You've deceived me. You've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with the joy of singing and the music of timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done this foolish thing. And he was told not to say nothing good or bad. I have the power to harm you. But last night the God of your fathers said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. But yet he's talking. But yet he's running his mouth. Right? Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods? So all this playing, the main thing he's concerned about is stealing of the gods. Now why would Jacob now been tricked 10 times. So Jacob finally comes to grips and realizes that this man is lying to him, that he's always lied to him. So now he wants to, I'm just checking the Facebook. So now and he's concerned about him stealing God, but now he wants to act like, oh, I would have sent you out with harps and timbrels and you didn't let me kiss my daughters and all this kind of stuff. When we know that Laban is not that kind of guy. And Jacob answered to Laban, I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. Now, in their tradition, once a daughter is married off to the husband, she doesn't belong to the father anymore in respect of where she goes and what she does. But yet, in this story, they're trying to indicate as if the daughters still belong to the father. And as if he took them away as a captive of war, which doesn't make any sense based on their culture, based on the culture of that day. He would not have acted in this format. His main thing was he was getting that free work from Jacob, and he wanted to keep getting that free work from him. And as long as he was in the same area, then he can continue to, Laban can continue to use him and try to regain some of his wealth that he had been losing because Jacob was performing his little science experiments. Right? So he said he was afraid that he would harm him. Now, if he believed that his God was with him, because his God said, if you leave, then I'm with you. So why would you be afraid if you know that your God is supposedly going to be with you? And then he goes on saying, but if you find anyone who has your God, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me. And if so, take it. Now, Jacob didn't know that Rachel had stole the gods. So basically, without that knowledge, he basically has put his wife into a death sentence without him actually knowing it. Yeah, when I said, didn't Jacob deceive him with the daughters? Yes. And I think this is chapter 31. So back in chapter 29, I believe, is when he deceived them by tricking him and making him think that he was going to get Rachel, but he wound up getting Leah because Leah had a lazy eye, and Laban figured nobody would ever want her, and she's the oldest. So He tricked them into that one, and then tricked them into work after working for 7 years, then tricked them into working another 7 years to get Rachel. Right? That's why he said that earlier. Your father has changed my, in order to convince the daughter that, yeah, you should leave with me. Your father has changed my wages 10 times. So Jacob is not that smart of a guy at all. Right? So, lost my space. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two female servants. Because remember, he also, in chapter 30, when they was having a baby making competition, Leah and Rachel gave slave wives to Jacob, and he impregnated them. So when these people who are saying the 12 tribes of Israel, because this is where you get your 12 tribes of Israel, is through Jacob and his 2 wives and 2 slave wives. So many of the tribes, most of the tribes came from slave wives. But of course, in the way that they looked at things, if the slave wife was a handmaid of Rachel, then Rachel claims those children. If the slave wife is a handmaid of Leah, then Leah claims those children as her own, even though biologically they are not. They are the children of the slave wives. So some of these tribes of Israel are slave wives' children. They're not Rachel and Leah's children. So your part of your 12 tribes comes out of a form of slavery. So Laban, now Rachel is about to tell this lie, right? And the thing about her telling this lie is that when people say, oh, you're not keeping the commandments, you got to keep the commandments of God, you're not keeping the commandments, I keep the commandments. These stories all have an underdog facing great obstacles and overcoming them with the aid of God. A lot of these stories do have that theme to them, because that's how you want to write a good propaganda story. A good propaganda story is that you start down low and then you rise and you defeat. Most of our movies today have that underdog kind of thing to them. Even when the person's supposed to be this super action person, they always get to a point where they're getting their tail whooped and then they go through it. They pull something out of themselves to make it through. But Rachel's about to tell this lie. She said, now Rachel has taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, do not be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period. So he searched but could not find the household gods. This is important. This is important because when people say you got to keep the commandments, one of those commandments, and understand the commandments are far more than the 10 commandments. They're like all kind of laws and commandments in this Bible, in the Old Testament. And then people say, well, we don't have to keep the Old Testament because Jesus. No, the only portion of the Old Testament that Jesus is supposedly have kept you away from is the fact that you have to perform ritual sacrifices in order to be forgiven for your sins. He said that I come not take one tittle or one jot from the Old Testament. So meaning that all the stuff in the Old, you are supposed to still keep. And one of those things is what's going on right here, where Rachel lies because she wants to keep her gods with her. Rachel does not worship Jacob's gods. Rachel worshiped Sin, Ishtar, Shamash. She worshiped those gods, the Akkadian gods, the Sumerian gods, because she's a child of Ur. She's from Laban's family. And when later on we're going to talk about Nahor, she's from that group. And so she doesn't worship this God of Israel as some would like you to believe. But she lies and says that I'm on my period. Now, according to those laws, and not just the Hebrew laws, this was a law that you found in most cultures back then, right? Where if a woman is on her cycle, you're not supposed to touch her. You're not supposed to touch anything that she has touched. You're not supposed to lie in the bed with her. You're not supposed to do any of those things. So when somebody tells you that you're not keeping the commandments, ask them, do you touch your wife or a woman when she's on a period? Do you sit on the same sofa, lie in the same bed, use the same shower, do all these things that she has touched? Do you eat her food that she has touched? Do you do all these things when she's on her period? Because according to your book, that Jesus didn't take away any of the laws that you're supposed to do except for the ritual sacrifice for the forgiveness of sin. Do you still touch him? Because if you do, then you are in violation. And that's why Laban, although he's from Samaria, he's Arcadian or Samaria, he is not going to search where she is sitting because that is against his religion. So she lies. First she lies, first she steals, and then she lies. So the woman, the primary woman that is accredited for your 12 tribes is a liar and a thief. So is it truly an underdog story that is aided by God when God allows for the hero, the shero, to lie and steal? That's not good morality. That's a bad moral example of what a person should be, what a woman should strive for, what a husband should strive for. Because earlier Jacob lies and said that, well, God is the one who, an angel came and showed me, that the speckled and spotted sheep was going to mate and have more speckled and spotted sheep. And Laban is mad now because I got all the speckled and spotted sheep. When he went and did this little, they can have sex in front of the striped wood and they're going to have speckled and spotted sheep. So these so-called hero underdog people are actually just liars and thieves. So this is where your 12 tribes are coming from some liars and some thieves. And Jacob has already been shown that for the way he treated his brother Esau. We're going to talk about Esau on the next video when we do chapter 32, when he goes back to Esau. Right? So after he searched, he can't find nothing. Now Jacob's going to get indignant. Right? And Jacob was angry and took Laban to ask, "What is my crime?" He asked Laban. "How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of your relatives and mine, and let them judge between the two of us." So now Jacob is like, "Yeah, ain't nobody stole your stuff. Ain't nobody stole your gods. You came in here hunting me down. These my wife. This is my wife. These my children. I can do what I want to do with them." So now he's indignant. When at first he said, "Oh, I left because I was afraid you was going to harm me," but you're supposed to have God on your side. What you afraid of? Why are you afraid? You shouldn't be afraid. It's not how that's supposed to work. And he goes on pontificating. "I have been with you." Ooh. Let me check Facebook real quick. What's up, Facebook people? I'm going back and forth on Facebook. Where is that? "I have been with you for 20 years. Your sheep and your goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten ram from your flock. I did not bring you animals, thorn or wild beasts. I bore the loss myself, and you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime and the cold at night, and my sheep fled from my eyes, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this was the 20 years. It was like this for 20 years in your household. I worked for you for 14 years for 2 of your daughters, and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and toil of my hand, and last night he rebuked you." So now Jacob is all indignant. He's mad now, and rightfully so. He should be mad because this man is tricked him, right? And Laban answered Jacob, "The women are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us." Hey, Coach, it's been a while since I've caught your live. Yeah, appreciate that. Because I haven't done a live in 7 months. But we will start doing them more often now. That my life is a little bit more streamlined. So Jacob is like, okay, but how is the daughters his, the children his, the flocks his? They made deals, they made covenant, but this shows how Laban had kept tricking him. And this showed that he was dumb enough to fall for each trick, right? But this is the the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which I've never understood. Why is it God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when Jacob's name was changed to, it's going to later be changed to Israel? Shouldn't it be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, and not Jacob? But we're going to see that they're going to keep calling him Jacob, even though he changed his name to Israel the whole time. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And pillars are something that you will find throughout a lot of the ancient ruins when you go to Israel. That people set up pillars. I mean, you'll find this everywhere, actually. They're all over the world. People set up stone pillars to represent their gods, right? And he said to his relatives, gather some stones. So they took stones and piled them in a heap. And they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar. I'm going to mess that name up. Sahaduthra. And Jacob called it Gilead. One is the Akkadian name, the other one is his Hebrew name. Because they have they worship different gods, right? Did you tell them about touching of the thigh to seal the deal? Touching of the thigh to seal the deal was way back in, I think, chapter like 28. So you have to go to What's Wrong with the Bible, chapter 28 or 27, 28 to get that one. But we talked about that one in that one. Where are I? No, Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why it was called Gilead. It was also called Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between, and this Lord is capitalized, so it means God. Watch between you and me when we are away from each other. Meaning that if people forget, God is always watching, is what he's trying to say. The heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not go past this heap on your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap and pillar on my side to harm me. Now, this your side, my side thing, right, is something that is a repetitive theme. You had the same thing when it was Abraham and Lot, when they split up, the territory, because their fortune had grown so big that they needed to separate to be able to increase their fortune. So you see this same theme of this is your land, this is my land, kind of deal. And a pillar of rock is supposed to separate the two. And it's really more just symbolic, if anything else. Then he goes on to say, and we're going to talk about this part, definitely. May the God of Abraham, and this is Laban speaking, may the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor and the God of their father judge between us. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country and invited his relatives to the meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them, and he left and returned home. Now, interesting thing here, there's a point of understanding. And this is why I say this Bible validates other gods. It's validating other gods because he's saying that Laban is saying, may the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor. Now, Abraham and Nahor are brothers. Okay? These two brothers, Nahor is Laban's father. And of course, Isaac. Abraham is, you got Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob. Jacob and Esau. Nahor, who was from Ur, would have worshipped those same gods. Would have worshipped Shemesh, the sun god, would have worshipped Sin or Nana, the moon god, as well as the female deity in the group, because the female in the group would have been Ishtar or Elnana. So you got and Sin and Nana, so they would have had the child, Nahor, so it would have been the father, mother, and the masculine, the feminine, and the son, right? And of course the son is Shemesh, sun worship, as we often see in many of these beliefs back in the day and as well today. So your book is validating the promises the deal, as far as the judgment between them from gods that the book claims do not exist, that the book claims are idols, are false gods. But in this sentence, Laban is saying that we're going to put this deal, we're going to do this deal, make this promise to each other based on your belief in your God and my belief in my gods, and that they are both valid. So when people say that the Bible is only about their God, it is not actually so. The Bible actually accepts bargains made on the heels of other gods. And that's something you won't hear preached in any church, because if they would have to then validate those gods, and they won't. They're not. So he got up and left. So I was asked earlier, what moral or understanding? Oh, hey, Bridget, all the way from New Zealand. Well, we reaching out. What can we learn from all this nonsense of these stories? What can we? Because they're stories. There's propaganda in order to. I'm sorry. Jagar Sahaja is Aramaic. It's not Sumerian or Akkadian, but it's Aramaic. So what stories can we learn are supposed to be taught from this? Most people, like I said, would go with how my man up here earlier on TikTok was talking about. It's kind of like an underdog story, that Laban was, cruel and mean and tricking Jacob into all this different stuff, to changing his wages 10 times, but Jacob still comes on top with his wives and his two regular wives, his two purchased wives, and then his two slave wives, that he was able to escape and leave. And then even when he was caught up to, he was able to be indignant towards Laban because he hadn't stolen anything. But when we actually examine who Jacob is, who Rachel is, we see that both of them are liars. Jacob was lying to his wives about the fact that, the striped sheep came because I had a dream and God did it, when he actually did not invoke God at all in the previous chapters, and he had them mate in front of some striped wood, and that created the speckled and spotted and striped sheep, herd. And then he was able to increase his wealth and thereby decrease the wealth of Laban. We see that Rachel, not only did they engage in a baby making contest and have made him marry some slave wives and have sex with the slave wives, but we also saw that she went and stole her father's gods. Now, an interesting aspect of that is that Rebecca is it more about bloodline, or is it more about what they worship? Rebecca wanted Isaac to marry someone from her bloodline, right? It wasn't about their worship. It wasn't about the fact that Canaanite women, even though they said because these Canaanite women worship different gods. No, it was about keeping that bloodline as to why she wanted Isaac, who she said was her favorite child, to go and marry somebody from her family. Because remember, Rebecca is Isaac's cousin, because Abraham and Nahor are brothers. Laban is her father, and she married her, she married her cousin. Isaac was her cousin. So they want to keep the bloodline. And this cousin marriage is not abnormal. When you research people like the Incas, the Mayans, the Aztecs, you'll see that their laws of governing marriage back in the day was that you pick from someone from your immediate from your family grouping. Whether it's the sister, brother, cousin, niece, nephew, you pick from your family group. So people back then believed that if you wanted to keep the purity of their bloodline. So this is not abnormal, but it's not something new. And it's interesting because if you think about it, the Aztec, the Mayans, the Incas never knew about this story. Didn't know this stuff. But they came up with the same idea of marriage, the same idea of maintaining bloodlines, right? So is it a universal group mindset that doesn't require a God or a book or anything like that for people to do the same thing? I mean, hell, they, just as those people created roads over in the Levant, they created roads over there. They created the wheel, they created all these things. So can we say that the wheel was invented by these people? No, because other people created the wheel and carriages without ever learning from somebody else. They built roads without ever learning from somebody else. They figured it out themselves. When people talk about pyramids being all over the world, yeah, you can look at the Sumerian story and see how Enki went all over the world, and Ishtar went all over the world, and they built pyramids and that sort of thing. Or you can look at it as, if you give a child 10 blocks, they're either going to build a square structure up, or they're going to build a pyramid. And the pyramid is most likely what they're going to build. You know, they're going to build a triangle because it becomes very stable. But in this, we see that Rachel, she also lied. She lied about being on her period in order for her father not to find out that she stole the guys in order to save her life, because her husband had decreed that if somebody stole them, that person was going to have to be put to death. So she lied and said she was on a period. And her father, keeping the commandments of the Akkadian Sumerian religion, knew that he couldn't touch a woman or anything that she sat on, touched, or made if she was on her period. She was considered unclean. So is a woman being on her period an unclean tenet from the Bible? Or is it an unclean tenet that the Bible picked up from other cultures? Because remember, Abraham also comes from the city of Ur. Abraham originally is a person who would have known of the gods Sin, Shemesh, Ishtar, Nana, that's the Sumerian names for the same people. He would have known of those gods. He would have known of those rules. And even when the northern Israelites came out of Babylon in 535, they would have known about the Babylonian religion that also said that you can't touch anything or sit on anything that a woman on her period. That was a taboo from other cultures. People like to think that it comes from the Bible, but it doesn't. It comes from other cultures had that idea before the Bible ever even thought about having that idea. So is it something that's just from the Bible? The answer is no, it's not. That it picked up things from other. And that's one of the things we can come to understand from this story, for those of us who have walked away from Christianity and other traditional religions, is that a lot of elements from these stories are not original elements. These are elements that comes from other cultures that the people who will become Hebrew came out of. Not something that they did themselves, but they came out of a culture, and they took some of those stories, propagandized them to make them their own stories. And that's where they get these things from. So to believe that this book is the inerrant word of God would be fooling and lying to yourself, because archaeology and history shows us that it's not. And thereby it strengthens your mindset, your emotional state, and that gut feeling that you have to look at these as just stories of a small little group culture that has been forced down the throats of so many people around the world, and people just hold on to them as if it is the gospel truth, to use the terminology. But it should strengthen all of us who have walked away. And that's the main reason why, one of the main reasons why, other than for my children's sake, the main reason why I do this, I go through these things, because I want you to go back and read this for yourself. I want you to go back and study all of this stuff for yourself so that you can come to your own understanding of them. This book will tell you, lean not to your own understanding. But whose understanding is everybody who reads this book and believes in the book is leaning on? Most people are leaning on the understanding that they got from their parents, that they got from their pastors, that they got from their community. They're not leaning onto a God understanding. They're leaning onto what they were taught by other people. Right? Exactly, Didi, from the pastors. That's who they're learning these things from. Right? So it is imperative. I was just talking to someone the other day. She's going through some life struggles. And I told her that your mind can reason anything in or out. Your heart can emotionalize anything in or out. But that gut feeling, that gut instinct, that thing that tells you Right in there, that's connected to source. That is what you should listen to. And then let your heart and your mind reinforce what your gut is telling you and follow that. Every time it tries to tell you to go away from it, from your gut, it's leading you in the wrong direction. Listen to your gut. That's connected to source energy. That's connected to source knowledge. Source knowledge is ever present because that's why cultures around the world without connection to one another have developed the same technologies, utilize the same processes, and the only thing that differs is the terrain, the ecological community that they live in. That has the only thing that makes the difference. Okay, so use these stories to understand why if you decide to walk away from them, use these stories to validate it, to validate your gut feeling that this stuff is not what it's cracked up to be. It's not the doctrine. The doctrine is different from what it actually is saying, and be able to reinforce your gut feeling that this is not for me. Let your mind read these things, understand these things, so that you can then properly walk away from it without having any kind of remorse or fear. Because I understand, especially if you're new to walking away from a religion that you've grown up with, sometimes it's hard. Do you know how hard it was for me to throw away a Bible when I was like in my 20s? I felt like I might be doing something wrong when I got ready to throw it. But that was just emotions. Those were my emotions trying to convince me that I was wrong, right? To be able to say Jesus is fake, bruh, it worked on my mind. When things weren't going as well for me, my mind started to say, wow, is it because I've walked away? Is it because I don't believe? But then I look around and I say, oh, wait a minute, that dude over there, he believes with great faith, and he is in just as bad a situation that I'm in. And then when my situation elevates, right, and I look back and I look at that person and their situation hasn't elevated, then I look at all these things that I follow up here as far as how to live my life and business and that sort of thing. And there's another whole wall over here full of stuff. And I said, oh, let me get back to a definiteness of purpose, a definiteness of plan, and a definiteness of action. And then all the attributes that I need to be able to follow that, which is listed here. And mastery over self is the first thing. And that mastery over self is, part of that, is being able to distinguish what is good information from any religion and what is not. What is something I need to believe and what is something I don't need to believe? What is something that I can prove factually? And let me ride with those facts. The facts are that none of these people have ever been proven in history to exist. None of them. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, none of them. There are no structures. There are no potteries. There are no graves. There is absolutely nothing in history that we have found that validates that any of these people ever existed. And if there is no fact, we can prove the Egyptians existed. We can prove the Hermetic people. We can prove the Kushite people existed. We can prove the Incas, the Mayans, the Aztecs. We can prove the Hopi, the Pueblos. We can prove so many other groups of people existed in ancient times. But there is a group of people we cannot prove that they existed in ancient times past 1400. And that would be the Hebrew people. There's zero proof of their existence other than this book, right? As far as them existing prior to the 1400s. And the only reason we know they existed in and around the 1400 BCE is because of the Meneptah stele, because it talks about how the Pharaoh of that time conquered the Israelite people. That's it. It talks about conquering the Israelite people. And then we know in history that at the time of the Exodus supposedly had happened, when we get to that one, that the Exodus happened, that they left Egypt for more Egypt because the land of the Levant was controlled by Egypt. They were vassal kingdoms at that time frame. So this story is really just a huge propaganda story to uplift the people. And that's not uncommon. The Kemetic story is a story to uplift the Kemetic people. Sumerian stories are one to uplift the Sumerian people. All of them are designed to uplift people. Just like the American story is a story to uplift, primarily white Americans. That's what these stories are for. So we should not take them as this is what source, what God, the creator, has given to man. Because if it was, why is it so different around the world? Why isn't this story everywhere? Why wasn't Jesus everywhere? Why is his name even Jesus? Because his name wouldn't even be Jesus. You know, why aren't these stories everywhere? So that's about all I got for this chapter. After pontificating some more, if you got any questions though, I got a few minutes. What time is it? I got about 15 minutes before I need to turn this machine on so I can clear this smoke out of my house. I don't usually smoke in my house, but I didn't want to shoot this video outside because it's cold. So anybody got any questions? We got people on TikTok, we got people on, Facebook, we got people on YouTube. But I would ask that anybody who watched this, please go over and join my YouTube channel. It's my name, LaRenzoreid on YouTube. So go over and join that channel, subscribe to that channel. If you're on these other programs, follow the pages, you know, but I like some YouTube better. James Jones, putting a resume in for a guest on the show. A guest on what? This show? On my podcast? I guess I'll be a podcast. Yeah, I guess it is technically a podcast. This is Randy. Randy who? Randy from the Cigar Lounge, Randy? It better not be Randy from Cigar Lounge. Who the hell is James Jones? You wait till I see you. You know, I ain't gonna be at the lounge until Wednesday because I'm off on Monday and Tuesday. But yeah, so Randy, James Jones, whatever your name is, we can make that happen, bro. Certain groups of people, when they're in the cigar lounge, we can have this discussion. We don't have it all the time. It depends on who's in the room. But yeah. Finally catching the live. I would love to have a schedule like every Tuesday at 8 o'clock p.m. we're going to do a live, or 6 p.m. But my life is not that streamlined yet. Dee Dee says I don't know the Bible that much, but I listen for understanding. And I've been rocking with Dee Dee for, how long have I been knowing you? At least 7 or 8 years that I've been in contact with Dee Dee. Actually met her when I was in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know if she still does it, but she has great tarot readings. And one time, so Dee Dee did a tarot reading for me. And if I remember correctly, some of it talked about my business and my relationship. I gotta tell you, she was on point. So Dee Dee Alchemy, she's on YouTube as Dee Dee Alchemy. Capital D, apostrophe S, Alchemy. She does tarot readings. She did mine, and in around 2015, no, it was about 2017, 18, and it was on point. It was on point, my first tarot reading, and what she got out of it came to pass. I wish I could find it right now. I don't remember. I don't know. It's in a book, but I've moved a couple of times, so I don't know where that book is. I really want that book, but it was good. Any other questions? Well, go to Dee Dee Alchemy, support her channel. She's also great in fitness. I got about 15 dad bod pounds to get rid of. Ricky Newsom, what's up, Coach? Why did the video stop with you and Kevin? It stopped. Me and Kevin, and for those who don't know, there's very few people I call friend. One of my friends in the spiritual realm is Kevin Wesley. 2015, 16. I was doing videos with Kevin up to 2018. And goddamn, we used to do these videos, I swear, they would last like 4 hours.
They were meant to last an hour, hour and a half, but they would last like 4 hours. And honestly, there's no rift between Kevin and I. Let me go ahead and dispel that. There's no rift between Kevin and I. We stopped doing them. I stopped. Kevin didn't stop. I stopped doing them because all that, if you remember, there was always these debate, and people would come on, and they were the opposing side. And this is going to sound a bit arrogant, but it's not. It's just, if I'm going to debate someone, you got to come with me with more than just scriptures, you know? You got to come with me with some history. You got to come with me with some archaeology. You got to come, with something more than just, Younger and, Tacitus, they wrote about Jesus. Marvel writes about Spider-Man. Does that mean he existed? Homer wrote about different gods. Does that make those gods valid? Yeah, he wrote about the city of Troy, and they found the city of Troy. But does that mean those gods or demigods that participated, they really existed? People wrote about Hercules. Hercules existed as a person, as a king of Argos, but did he do all the 12 trials that he went through? Doesn't validate that. So I got bored, honestly. I got bored with debating the same thing, and then I felt bad. I don't know if you watched the show. I felt bad when one guy was on there, and he really infuriated me. And I went in on him hard, and he started crying, and I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy. If that's your faith, stick with your faith. I'm not trying to convert people, but when he was on there and he was crying, because I, lack of a better term, annihilated his thought process and his information, I didn't like the way I felt afterwards. So I started pulling back from doing videos like that. I still get people who want to debate me, but if you can't do it intellectually, if it's all emotional based, I really don't have time for it. It bores the shit out of me. That was fine. So that's why I stopped. And even Kevin, for the most part, has stopped doing those kinds of videos as well. But if somebody is intellectual enough, I wouldn't mind. We can have a conversation. So I would invite anybody who wants to challenge, we want to go have a debate, but it has to be an intellectual debate. Yeah, we can do that. I don't even know how to set that shit up, really. I know how to add people on TikTok. I don't know how to add people onto YouTube. Although I guess, actually I do. I can use my Zoom account, and then Zoom can be put on YouTube as a live and all that sort of thing. And I know Facebook allows you to do it too. So no more questions? No more questions? No more questions or statements? There's my mail guy. So I'm going to do at least once a week. I'm going to come back and we're going to continue to go through the what's wrong with the Bible. And then we'll also start taking on some other subject matters. Do you believe we come from apes? Nope. Not in the sense of Darwin's evolution. But even Darwin himself said that if the fossil record doesn't demonstrate thousands of, how do you say it? If it doesn't indicate thousands of how a species transformed from prehistoric, the old to the new, that's not exactly how I said it, then it's invalid. So I don't think we came from apes, although it's way out there for most people. I honestly think that the Sumerian story is more accurate as to what happened, because the Sumerian story is validated. I mean, your Bible kind of says the same thing, but the Bible, not your Bible, the Bible kind of says the same thing. But when I look at the Mesoamerican stories, the Aztecs, Mayans, Incas, Pueblos, when I look at the Australian story, the Aboriginal stories, all of them seems to have this, the gods came down and then gene manipulated what was a different species, a prehistoric man, and then sped up man's evolution. Not that we evolved from apes, that wouldn't work, but that they infused their genome into our prehistoric ancestors' genome, which sped up our evolution, our adaptations, and then we became more modern humans. The Sumerian story talks about how Enlil, the people who were mainly present was Enlil, Enki, and Harsag, Anu, that they had 16 different variations of man that they tried to utilize their genes to increase man's DNA to match more of the Anunnaki DNA. And you know, they killed, like, I think, not Dumuzi, but they killed another Anunnaki and infused everybody. So I'm more apt to believe that and follow that. Even like, so my father's family comes from, just fell out of my head. What's Mansa Musa's people? Mali, the Dogons. My father's family are Dogons, and as I've been researching the Dogons, I see that even them, with saying that the Nomo, who were reptilian type people, came from a planet that circled Sirius B, and they knew this long before we had telescopes to figure this out, that they infused their DNA and elevated the status of man with no DNA. That story, that line of thought is around the world, right? So I tend to follow that more so. That's a higher probability than we came from apes. Man, got here late, Uncle Renz. Oh, so you know the popcorn shop. Question, have you ever seen any forbidden knowledge info? He goes into the Enuma Elish, the Emerald Tablets. Yeah, actually, I've seen his page. I watched like 15 minutes of a video because somebody recommended it. In that 15 minutes, I went ahead and subscribed to his page, but I really haven't taken a lot of time to watch his stuff, a lot of his stuff. But I've seen some of his TikToks, and I like it, you know. And just like how I tell y'all with me, you know, listen, and then go research it for yourself. So I listen, and I go and I research things for myself, you know, because I'm not gonna, I gotta know it for myself. I gotta know it for what it means to me, and then I research the opposing thought as well, because I want to see both sides of the story. You know, like they say, there's his story, there's her story, and then there's the truth somewhere in the middle. Right? So I listen to both of them. You know, so I have listened to Forbidden Knowledge a little bit, but I plan to listen to more of his stuff. But yeah, it's good though. Good information. And that's the thing. I have a hard time understanding how we just went over chapter 31. You can see how they respected the Sumerian Akkadian gods, but you would ignore it. You can see how Rachel was a thief and a liar. Laban is a trickster. Jacob is a liar and a trickster. But yet, we still hold strong to these people. People still hold strong to them. We can see how things don't match up historically, archaeologically, but we still want to hold strong to these things. You know, cognitive dissonance is an interesting thing because people, it's hard for them to walk away from something that they truly want to embody and accept for themselves. And to go through the change is difficult. It's very difficult for people. That's one reason why I don't try to change people. If you are already situated in your religion and you're happy and you're moral, hey man, stay where you're at. But if you're not, you're immoral, you might need to go research something else and find something different to base your morality on. And really, you should just base your morality, to me, on, I'm not going to do anything that I wouldn't want anybody to do to me or my family. I don't want you to steal. I don't want to be stolen from, so I'm not going to steal. I don't want to be murdered, so I'm not going to murder. I don't want to be raped, so I'm not going to rape. You know, I don't want to be cheated, so I'm not going to cheat. You know, and this book, chapter 31, and this whole story of Jacob is an oddity because it goes against that thought process. Jacob cheated. Jacob was cheated by Laban. But then Jacob goes back and cheats Laban. But then Jacob is rewarded for his cheating and his lying. Makes no sense. That's not a good moral story. Hell, the Buddhists have a better moral story than that. Both of Laban and Jacob got bad karma. Ramses. Yep, it was I who told you about forbidden knowledge page. Hold on, my brother trying to call me. Let me hang up on him. Who told you about forbidden page? I'm coming through this weekend. Everyone, we have a great conversation at the shop. Yeah, Ramsey comes to the cigar lounge. Now he say he coming through this, but yes, Ramsey, he the one who told me about forbidden knowledge. He say he gonna come by the shop. Last time he told me he was gonna come by, he didn't come by. Yep, I'm putting you on blast, bro. You shouldn't have told me that. But look forward to seeing you, dude. We do have some good conversations at the shop. And he knows that if the wrong group is in there, we'll go outside and have our conversations. It's all relative to who's in the shop. We don't just have those conversations because religion is not something we talk about in a cigar lounge unless you have a certain group who can handle that conversation. So Ramsey, you should have been there Saturday afternoon because we had one of those discussions Saturday afternoon, sir. But for real, I'm gonna get off this thing because I gotta go work out. Well, actually, my basement just got squared away, so now I can take all the weight equipment out of my garage and put it in the basement. So y'all have a great day. And remember, you gotta free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibration. And I'll see y'all on the next live. Wait a minute, whoops. Ricky, do you believe we are all connected? Yes, I do. I do believe we are all connected, but as I was talking about earlier, we don't listen to our gut. We listen to our heart and we listen to our mind. If we listen to our gut, which your gut have synaptics like your brain. If we listen to our gut, then we can we'll live a better life. We'll live a more connected life. We'll be more connected to nature. We'll be more in sync with nature. Yes, I love a lot of our modern technology, but we really need to get ourselves situated back to where we're in sync with nature, which will then sync us with each other. And then things that we have in our world today that shouldn't exist, maybe they won't exist. Like we have, racism for one. Racism, people being thought of based on race is something that came about in the 16th century. Prior to that, it wasn't something that people thought about or dealt with, but it's been created. And if we realize certain things like that, then we can live a better and more prosperous, harmonious life with each other. But religion and nationalities and race and cultures and all these things, the fight over resources keeps us disconnected from each other. It's a utopian mindset to be able to get to that point. I don't think we ever will. Would you agree that the Bible is a book of allegories? Pretty much. It's a book of allegories, but it's also a big ass propaganda book to make one group seem better than the rest. Or to validate their existence. Now I'm for real, I'm done now. Because it's after 5 o'clock, I gotta work out. Because I gotta get in shape like Ramses. I can't, he ain't gonna be the only one posting beach pictures and stuff like that. So again, you gotta free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibration. Bye.